Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining today's technical onboarding session. We'll be focusing on Veeam Backup Replication today. We'll be doing a deep dive in the initial install, config, best practices, and other related topics. We also have Ken Fisher in the Q&A to help answer any questions you may have, so we do encourage you to ask any questions you have on the fly, and we will answer them as we go along. All right, so to get started, we'll start off with the introduction and kind of just as we just did, go into core components and architecture, advanced features, optional components, the general product configuration or things that might be overlooked that could be important, job concepts and configurations, in more granular detail, restore capabilities and the different ways you can restore and some best practices related to that. Security is kind of just an open-ended topic. We will cover best practices generally, as well as features within Veeam that you can use to further harden your environment, mostly with immutability and similar features, but there's a lot of different things we'll discuss. Tips and tricks and additional resources. As we get to the end, you'll see some of those. So, Veeam Data Platform. So today, like I said, we will be focused on foundation. So kind of Veeam Backup Replication is kind of the core of that. You also do have with foundation AI guidance. You may notice that at the top right of the VBR console. You also do get AI-powered malware detection. Doesn't include all of our malware detection features, and in our Veeam 1 webinar, we will cover some of those features, and other ones we will as well. And there are certain features with advanced and premium that relate to the malware scans and security integrations that are beyond the scope of this video that we will have already and will cover in other webinars. But yeah, for the scope of this one is basically backup, replication, restoring, the AI that you do have in Foundation in any latest version of VBR, and the AI-powered inline malware detection scanning. And if you like what you see there, then that may be worth looking into the advanced or premium. So in terms of the Foundation product and what it can integrate with to protect directly in an agentless way. So VMware vSphere, anything version 6 through, as of the recording today, through 8 update 3 is fully supported on the latest version of Veeam Backup Replication. VMware Cloud Director 10.1 through 10.6 is also supported. On the Hyper-V side, Server 2012 through 2025, fully supported. Azure Local or Azure Stack Hyper-Converged is supported, pretty much fully supported. There are some, like with the virtual lab limitations that we can maybe answer questions about, or if you wanted to have a health check discussion about, but in terms of backup and restore, it's essentially fully supported, and even some of the like replication, some of those other features. Nutanix AOS 6.5 or later, also supported. Red Hat virtualization, 4.5 or later, or 4.4 specific Service Pack 1, that specific version is an exception. 4.5 or any other stable release is also supported, just to clarify that. And then the OLVM, Oracle Linux Virtualization Manager, 4.5.4 or later, Proxmox Virtual Environment, 8.2 or later. All of those are direct integrations. You do not need agents to protect them. Although if there is a virtual hypervisor you use that you either wanted to use agents for like an application consistency reason, or just because there's not a direct integration, but you want to be able to protect the workloads on it, you can always use agents. Or of course, if it's a physical server, that was kind of the original use case for agents. And so, yeah, in terms of what it can protect, whether physical or virtual, Windows Server 2008, R2, Service Pack 1 through Windows Server 2025. In terms of Workstation OS, if they're, yeah, most of them are physical, Windows 7 Service Pack 1 through Windows 11. Majority of popular Linux distributions, which are the full list you can't see there, but our documentation does have the full list there. We can answer questions about that, or feel free to request a help check. Mac OS X 10.13.x High Sierra through Mac OS X 15 Sequoia, also fully supported using the Mac OS X agent, Veeam Backup for Mac It's kind of how we phrase it. Also can be supported with agent is IBM AIX 7.1 through 7-3 or 7.3. Oracle Solaris systems, various versions that you see there are also supported in the different CPU architectures mentioned below. So a little bit different, and unstructured data seemingly more and more common with companies, and there's different types of unstructured data, of course. In terms of how we license and view them and structure them from like the type of job you would use, pretty similar. That's kind of how they're put in this slide together. But essentially what it is if you had like a file share, SMB, NFS on your network that wasn't connected to a server, or if you wanted to have better, Veeam had better track of file versioning differences between the versions, the file share backup works really well with that. If you have like an enterprise NAS hosting one of those shares, you can integrate using a storage integration to make that more efficient, put less load on the NAS. I would recommend that if you have Enterprise Plus and a supported system. And then, so backing up, like if you had S3 data or object storage data for a production purpose that is unrelated to Veeam that you wanted to back, or maybe it is related to Veeam, but typically in this context it would be unrelated to Veeam that you'd want to protect with Veeam. You can back that up as long as it is S3 compatible. We do list a few options there on specifics with like NetApp ONTAP FSX or Azure Blob S3, or really any S3 compatible storage repository that you can authenticate with. Veeam can back up using the unstructured data type of job. And so another type of object that Veeam can protect, so we can protect databases within an operating system in certain contexts, and we can answer questions if you had a specific one. In some cases, if there's a DBA that prefers using the native tool, but maybe wants the portability and extra redundancy and lack of single point of failure of like having the native tool store it locally to that system. So the plugin allows you to kind of have the best of both worlds, to where they can still use the scripts from the native tool, and our plugin even allows them to create the script with a GUI from the actual like, and if it's SQL, like Management Studio or whatever the case may be. And from there, it essentially just uses the native database backup and changes the default repository to a Veeam repository. So that way you can restore, depending on the database, restore from there, or at least be alerted on the job success or failure after the attempt. So it kind of gives you the central pane of glass with the benefits of the native backup tool. And other workloads, Entra ID, whether you have M365 or a single sign-on, there are a lot of situations where, whether app registrations or things that are, once they get cleared out of the recycling bin, if they're restored, would require register unique identifiers again. So we do protect Entra ID, and it is bundled in pretty well with VDC, although with VUL licensing in 12.3 or newer, you can protect that data as well. And so it's basically 10 to 1, the ratio for that. So 10 objects or users per one instance consumed. So to go over the licensing for the next couple slides, kind of the left side is the perpetual or per socket model. The right side is the instance-based or VUL universal licensing model. They differ in what they can protect and how they measure how the license is being consumed. So per socket, it's considered a legacy model. If you're an existing customer, in most cases, it may be beneficial to migrate to VUL. I'm happy to discuss that in a personal conversation, but you can still, if it makes sense to you or for whatever reason. And it licenses by the number of physical CPU sockets installed on the host, that the VMs that you're protecting. Instance-based is definitely the future-proof model, especially because it covers more workloads beyond just virtual. But how it consumes is basically by workload protected, regardless of the underlying hardware. So if mostly 1-to-1 with exceptions with like if it's a workstation OS, that is 3-to-1. Unstructured data, depending on there's different tiers of licensing for that, but that is licensed a little bit differently, and same with Entra ID. But mostly 1-to-1 for server OSs. And yeah, just to kind of reiterate that, so just it's a permanent license in the sense that you're renewing the maintenance agreement and product updates, which new features that can be important for sure. Subscription, kind of just the opposite of that. So it's not just maintenance, it's the functionality of the product, but also new features. And that's important to keep in mind as workloads like the Entra ID kind of to the whole industry. It's rebranded, but new features added, and the importance is kind of starting to dawn on people, some people faster than others. So it helps the fact that we can protect that now, that alone might be a reason to migrate to Vue if you had previously not been, but that's just one of many examples on why you might want to, other than just to continue having the product working when you renew. So core components and architecture. So these are kind of the 4 main components that you would see out of the box if you install Veeam Backup Replication. It will essentially assign the server you install Veeam on all of these roles. In most environments, as you scale out, that you would probably have separate devices allocated to those roles, but just to give you an idea of what they are and why sometimes it's helpful to know that by default it will use those the Veeam server as these roles. So yeah, the console is essentially what you see within the Veeam Backup server when you launch the application. You can install the console on a different workstation or server than the VBR server and point it to the console or point it to the backup server, and essentially it'll look like you're looking at the VBR server. So the backup proxy is the intermediary between source data and backup storage. So it reads data, compares changes, compression, dedupe, encryption, potentially malware detection, and then sends it to the backup repository, which is essentially like the storage for, and we'll go over the different types of backup repositories in a little bit, but it's essentially just where you're storing your backups in a Veeam proprietary format that you can move to different systems or restore to different platforms. That's one of the benefits to that unique file format as opposed to just a regular snapshot. And the backup server is kind of what you'd normally see within the VBR console if it's an all-in-one. And there are other components we will discuss, but these are probably definitely the first 4 you'd encounter. So installing it. So if you were to browse to that link, and if you're already signed in, that will take you directly to what you see on the right. If you're not signed in, you will basically see the left screen, and if you sign in on the left section of that left screen, then you will see the right screen. And then, in this case, we're talking about Veeam Backup Replication, and so you can specifically download that ISO or the whole Veeam data platform or whatever you're entitled to, depending on your licensing. So that's how you would get the installer with Veeam data platform in this current iteration. So if you were to download the installer, mount it, run the setup file, you would essentially be looking first at the screen on the right. You would probably be choosing Enterprise Manager or Backup Replication first. And for the scope of today's call, Backup Replication would be what you would have to install to get some use out of it. And so yeah, then the next step would be how do you want to license it, and you do have some. You kind of choose how you want to do it. If it's connected to the internet, you can sign in with the license admin account, and it just kind of keeps track of it for you. It's probably a more convenient way to do it if it is internet connected. You can browse the local license file if you have that downloaded already, and that's from that same portal that we showed on the previous slide, the my.veeam.com. You can get your license files, open support cases, view technical resources, and get the license keys. So if you update license automatically, that essentially enables usage reporting, and it gives you a bigger percentage of buffer for license overages. Optional if you want to do that or not. And then the next step after you click that is the configuration check, where it looks for any dependencies that Veeam will need to function properly, and if it's missing something, it will let you know. In some cases, like that one, that's something you would have to download from the Microsoft site if you don't already have it installed. Some of them will install it for you, and that one I think you will have to manually do it, but it's a case-by-case thing, and we can always help. And I would just make sure you download it from the direct Microsoft link if you're going to have to download it yourself, and then it should pass once it notices that it's there. And then these are the installation settings for VBR if you want to customize the folders, the service account. It will default to PostgreSQL, and going forward, increasingly so, we will recommend using PostgreSQL for VBR, but for various reasons, if you already invested in SQL full or if you just prefer it, there's no indication that SQL will be being dropped in future iterations, but with development in mind for PostgreSQL, it may make more sense to migrate now to kind of get ahead of that and have it probably will be have less issues as time goes on. Although there aren't really any issues now, I just mean it'll only get better. But you can choose, is my only point there. SQL Server, so yeah, you would, if it is an external one, or if it's that server, the server that you're installing VBR on, you can name the database. These are kind of the default ports. You can customize them if you had a reason to or wanted to, and you can choose whether or not you want to have it check for updates, although it really would just only notify you. You would still have to do the in-place upgrade at this time automatically, although version 13, we may have some interesting updates on that front. So the right screen is kind of, if you click install, or if you customize the settings, sorry, that's where you can choose the database engine if you didn't want to use PostgreSQL. If it's an in-place upgrade and you're not changing the database engine, you probably use existing, unless you wanted to do a new install and then maybe import the Veeam configuration backup. But this is basically just connecting to the database or installing a new one, authenticating it, and then clicking next. So that database that we talked about, now we're talking about the configuration database of either the PostgreSQL or SQL configuration that contains all of Veeam's indexing and settings, and not necessarily your backups, but all the information about your backups and the jobs and session history and malware detection history and all that good stuff. So and the idea is you want to have a backup of this so that if your Veeam server goes down or something like that, you can import that into, like, you can install a blank version of Veeam or maybe even have a standby version and import that config and essentially be back up pretty quickly. There are, depending on how quick, what your RTO requirements are, there may be there might be a better way to do that, but this is just the worst case, just so you have some kind of failback plan. And so it stores data about the infrastructure, jobs, and sessions. Yep, you can change it to SQL. So yeah, and you can either use that to restore in the event of the VBR server crashing or migrating it to a new server as just kind of regular maintenance. So going into a little bit more depth with the different components, this is just kind of an image of those components that includes the hypervisor that you'll be backing up. So depending on the transport mode, either the proxy or the backup server will make the initial request to the hypervisor to locate the VM. The data flow will kind of go, as the arrows suggest, from where it's backing up through the proxy or proxies to the repository. In this case, it's a backup workflow. It's pretty straightforward. Backup proxy. So there are different types of backup proxies. So if you're talking about like VMware backup, restore, replication, it would be like labeled in the interfaces of VMware proxy. So that's what that is. There's the VMware CDP proxy for continuous data protection, similar to replication, but it does tie into the VMware IO filters. So it needs to at least be assigned as its own type of proxy. It can be assigned to an existing managed server within Veeam. But that can be beneficial for very high change rate servers that you still have a low RPO, the low RTO replication requirements, but you don't want to like stun the VM by replicating it too frequently. CDP helps a lot with that. Hyper-V on-host and off-host, same concept. The on-host is the default configuration if you were to set it up out of the box. It essentially just kind of has the proxy as a VM on the host of the node that you're protecting the data on. As you scale out or in larger environments, you would probably have off-host proxy or proxies as well. It just depends on how much resource availability and those types of things. So I guess that to simplify that, it defaults to starting with on-host, and if you notice the proxy is the bottleneck, that is the next logical step to expand from there and reduce that. So Nutanix AHV is the Veeam backup for Nutanix AHV appliance has an embedded worker, which is essentially a proxy. That same concept kind of applies to Red Hat virtualization, Oracle KVM, Proxmox KVM. All of them are essentially appliances that have an embedded worker, and you can also deploy in like clustered environments, like extra workers or additional workers. So that's kind of what that terminology means, just to clarify that. So then general purpose in the interface, it will be labeled as an agent proxy. It is really more of a general purpose proxy since it's more than just agents. So you can do NAS backup, kind of like the unstructured data. That would be the proxy used for that. So file shares, physical servers off host backup if it's like connected to a SAN that you have a storage integration with would be like an example of where that would be used. So those are the different types of proxies depending on the system on the source side. Then responsibilities, there may be some nuances, but they're essentially they do the same thing just for the different production side systems. So that they retrieve the VM data from the production storage, compare for changes, compress, dedupe, encrypt, potentially scan for malware depending on the system and your licensing, and if you want it to do that, sends it to the backup repository if it's a backup, or through a proxy to a data store that you're replicating to. Yeah. So, and kind of similar to what we looked at earlier, just kind of backup proxy the data flow. In this case, it would be a Windows repository. That would be the only difference from that 2 slides ago, is that's unique. So we talked about how the proxy of the backup server, depending on transport mode, will contact the hypervisor to make an API request to contact the hypervisor to locate where the VM or VMs are located. Then the data will flow kind of as the arrow suggests, and the transport modes will go into a little bit more detail on what is not seen in this diagram, what we will discuss. So network mode is the default transport mode that we just were kind of alluding to, and this is that kind of similar image again. So it's basically sending it over the ESXi management network or management VLAN using NBD stands for network block device. So proxy sends a request to the host to locate the VM. The host locates the VM, instructs VMware vSphere via API to create a snapshot. That's what we use as our source. And so then it's basically sends it to the proxy, which will then sends it to the repository, and then you have it in that Veeam VBK or VIB, or we'll discuss the file extensions. But the benefit is like you have it in a format that is way more resilient than a typical storage snapshot, which can only be rolled back under certain conditions, whereas you can restore from bare metal with the Veeam Backup format. So that's kind of the idea of going through all that. So a different transport mode. This is better performance than network mode in generally speaking. Generally speaking, that is true. So the backup server, most of these are kind of the same. It gets a little bit different though because of this part. So instead of just kind of transferring it to the proxy, it will use SCSI to hot add or hot attach the VM disk that you're reading to the proxy that is being used in virtual appliance or hot add mode in this case. So it's kind of less latency basically compared to network block device or network NBD mode because it's connected to it via SCSI. So that is the main difference there. And so it would just need to be a VM on the hosting that you're backing the VM up from for that latency thing to be beneficial. And then that process where the snapshot is deleted after the backup is completed, that occurs for any of the transport modes, of course. So the main difference was the hot add SCSI attached to the proxy. So direct storage attached is kind of similar, except it uses like either fiber channel iSCSI, and it also uses the vStorage API to directly communicate with it. So once it triggers the VM snapshot, it gets the metadata and then essentially sends all of that metadata to the proxy, so then the proxy can handle the rest from there and reduces that load from that host that would previously have to do it in the hot add mode. So that combined with like backup from storage snapshot would probably be the most efficient in a VMware environment, if it's possible. And it all depends on like how necessary it is based on how much data, the change rate, what your backup window expectations are, what the reality of it currently is, and what the current bottleneck shows. And we can always help with that, but these are just kind of general guidelines. So backup proxy for Hyper-V. We did kind of discuss the on-host, off-host. So the processing with the on-host, and this is this is how it will be out of the box if you don't configure it specifically otherwise. So it occurs on the Hyper-V node hosting the virtual machines, hence the name on host. uses the VSS service native to Windows that you may or may not be familiar with. You probably are if you use Hyper-V. So VBR queries VM or Hyper-V to get the details. Different terminology, similar concept for most of these. So it uses VSS to get the point in time checkpoint. It kind of uses that's kind of Hyper-V terminology. Same concept as snapshot as far as Veeam is concerned in terms of the source to use as an application. Yeah, the source to use to back up the data. So the Veeam transport service reads the VM data and then sends it to the repository. So it's pretty much the same. It's just a matter of like how the scale of the environment, how many nodes in your Hyper-V environment you may want. And therefore, there's always a cleanup operation to make sure that you don't have any orphan snapshots. And in larger environments, or if your Hyper-V host is kind of already tight on resources and you don't want to have your proxy using some of those resources on that host, you can always deploy an off-host physical proxy to do that same job. And that is what usually in most medium to larger size environments, that's usually what we see and recommend. But if it's not running slowly within on host, I mean, I probably wouldn't do it just to do it, but same process though. It's just the only difference is that proxy at the number 3 label is off the host. That's the name. Then it cleans up the potentially orphan snapshots or just verifies that there aren't any and goes from there. So we're kind of grouping all these together since they are all KVMs, and the way Veeam has the appliances with the embedded workers, which are essentially like a send-in for proxy. It's kind of, I think that, yeah, it's 3 separate slides, but they got them grouped together because they're all KVMs. So it's maybe helpful to view them in that concept, in that same way. And yeah, so it uses AHV's native capabilities, and in 12.3 we added Nutanix guest tools integrations, so you have true application consistency now. And so it is agentless. This is you can almost kind of think of it as like a hot add. So the appliance is an appliance on the host, but it also has an embedded worker, and in a clustered environment you could deploy extra workers. That's the idea there. But this process is kind of the same. So it uses the REST API, links with the AHV cluster, creates a snapshot or protection domain, establishes a volume group on the AHV cluster, deploys the worker, mounts the VM disks via iSCSI. That's kind of why I compared it to Hot Hat, even though it's not the exact same. The worker retrieves VM data at the block level, applying compression deduplication, and transmits the data to the repository. So you can kind of see the similar concepts, but depending on the relevant hypervisor, which one we're talking about, the terminology is different and would matter. But that is the idea. So now we're talking about these two we actually did put in the same slide. So Red Hat and Oracle Linux Virtualization Manager, they both use overt. So it would make sense that we would kind of group them the same. Same process to get that image snapshot. So you would have whether it's RHV or OLVM, you would have the appliance deployed on the host or one of the nodes in the cluster. Appliance interfaces with the virtualization manager via REST API, creates a snapshot for the VMs you choose, creates an image transfer session, supplying the corresponding URL, deploys the worker, utilizing that URL to retrieve the data. The worker applies compression and deduplication to the data and sends it to the repository. So it's kind of the same, just uses different terminology. So we'll probably get more used to it as time goes on. And Proxmox, also a KVM. Yep, you see the appliance, really the worker is on the, or really the appliance is on there that has the worker. So it launches a worker on the host, where the VM is located. If there's none deployed there, use a worker from another host. I mean, unless if it is doing that and it's running slowly, that's probably a good place to start looking to optimize it. We can always help, but you wouldn't want to do that if you're looking to have optimal performance. Use a worker from another host, unless it's going, you're happy with the backup window performance. Connects to the Proxmox V server and creates a copy on write snapshot of the process VM. So triggering that snapshot that we will use as the source to send to the proxy or to send to the repository ultimately. The worker reads the data from the VM disk, compares it to the snapshot created as step 2, excludes changes, transfers the resulting data in the target repository in that native Veeam format. So if you need to restore that to a different hypervisor or even to the cloud layer, that's the beauty of the Veeam format as opposed to a snapshot, among many other reasons, but that's kind of why they said that probably. So how do you add one? So this is kind of looking at Veeam Backup and Replication. If you were to look at the bottom left quadrant and select Backup Infrastructure, and then select Backup Proxies kind of near the top leftish area on that left, or just on the top area of the left pane where it has the green arrow, and then add proxy. You can add, we just kind of went through all the different types of proxies, depending on which one you can add. We will discuss the VMware one. So, so this would be a VMware proxy. So like I alluded to earlier, that you already have one of these on the server you install Veeam on. As you scale out, depending on how many resources or how you size that server, that might be enough. But if you wanted to add more, this is how you would do that. So you can use multiple proxies depending on how you wanted to architect it. But so the main thing is you would choose this. You'd have to add a server so it'd be under managed servers, authenticate it, choose your transport mode, which we did discuss. It will automatically try to select the best one, and it kind of shows you the order of the highest is in theory the best. In most cases, in almost every case, that is true. But there are times where you'd want to set it statically. I've just anecdotally, I feel like I've seen that resolve issues with intermittent errors. The failover to network mode, I would definitely recommend, although I probably would not check it when you're first setting up one of the advanced transport modes, just to verify that it does work. And then once you know it's configured correctly, I would probably select failover to network mode unless you had a specific reason not to. The reason to check it is so that if something environmental occurs outside of Veeam's control that would prevent like virtual appliance or direct storage access from functioning properly, it can still fail over, so you get some sort of backup. It might be slower than normal, but you probably would want to check that. We'd recommend it. And the hosted proxy traffic encryption, it does come at a performance cost, so it's not checked by default, but the data that between the hypervisor and the proxy, which is a pretty limited scope, especially if it is used in the network mode, because that's by default using the management VLAN. But if it is a concern, you do have the option to enable that encryption. I would just reset. I would probably account for that when you're doing your sizing of the proxies, because that will increase what it needs to perform the same amount of things in the same amount of time. So if you're trying to, usually you probably leave it automatic unless you're trying to limit the scope for a specific reason, or if it's a huge environment and it's just slowing it down and having to automatically load it once a day. But yeah, if you had a specific reason, I'd select manual, but automatic is pretty common. It's not really, you're not backing up just because it's automatic. It's just detecting that in the case of this proxy. So the max concurrent task, that's essentially like, it correlates to it's like one CPU core is 2 concurrent tasks, you could say. And a concurrent task is like, let's say you have a VM with like several disks on, or with 2 disks on it, that would really be 2 tasks. So you'd have to keep that in mind. If you see if you have a one job with a bunch of VMs in it and a lot of total VM disks, and that number is a lot larger than the total number of available concurrent tasks from the proxy side, I mean, it would probably be a good guess that proxy would be the bottleneck, although probably worth verifying, but that's the idea. So if it is the Veeam server itself, even more so, but really in any case, we would recommend leaving 2 cores overhead and 2 gigabytes of RAM for the needs of the OS beyond just the Veeam role. That is especially true if it is also doing other roles as well. That green check mark, if you were to hover over it, can give you an idea of it's essentially just looking at how many CPU cores are on there and multiplying it by 2. So if you don't want to log into the system and see how many you could use, but I wouldn't necessarily assume you can max it out to that number unless it is dedicated to do only that one role. And even then, I would probably leave 2 cores for the OS. That is the concept of how to size that, and that for proxies and repository is a common config change that can mitigate bottlenecks. So that was kind of worth touching on for a moment. So let's take a 5-minute break on that note. So we will be back in 5 minutes. Alrighty, welcome back everybody. I think it's been about 5 minutes. We can go ahead and continue on. All right, so the next topic or section we will be covering are, we've kind of alluded just generically to backup repositories, and that was helpful in that context just to understand it as a target that Veeam is sending the backups. So now we'll talk about the different types of things that you can use in your environment or add to your environment that can be used as a Veeam backup repository. Um, So it's a storage location where backup files, copies of the data, metadata definitely necessary for restoration are stored. It can be local, remote. Part of the 32110 best practice policy is to have a copy local and remote, and even more than that we will probably discuss as the slides go on. And it serves as a centralized storage space for the backup replication data, since it can be restored to anything that Veeam has an integration with, even if it was not backed up from that system. So the different things that you can use. So direct attached storage, of course, if it's literally direct attached storage on a Windows server, Linux server, the hardened repository is a Linux server just using a pre-built ISO. So probably less, well, yes, that is a repository. And then even though it is direct attached, just in case there will be, or just in case you're wondering, if you attach via iSCSI to a Windows server, through Veeam, you'd want to add that as a direct attach, just because from the perspective of Windows, it thinks it's like it is direct attached in terms of drive letter. So it would be direct attach, even though it is kind of like a network. But that's the idea. I just want to clarify that because sometimes that creates confusion. But so direct attached storage, of course, network attached storage, so SMB, NFS shares, deduplication storage appliances. So there are many we can integrate with: Dell Data Domain, Exagrid, Fujitsu, Store Once, H by HPE, Infinidat, Quantum DXI. If you go to our Veeam Integrations Alliance directory, you can get the full list of that and a lot of other things that are definitely worth checking out. So the object storage S3 data, that's also a big option. And it's a great way to kind of achieve the offsite copy, especially if you want one that you don't have to necessarily manage the underlying hardware. Veeam Data Cloud Vault, and we will cover this a little bit more later on in some more slides, but Veeam Data Cloud Vault is one option for that. But really any S3 compatible storage, so Amazon S3, Azure Blob, IBM Cloud, Google Cloud, Wasabi, Backblaze. There's a lot of different ones, but Veeam Data Cloud Vault is kind of our turnkey solution to it. For storage as a service, but the idea with the object storage is any S3 compatible would work. Just depends on what your performance and integration requirements were. So within a backup repository, if you're looking at files that Veeam creates, you will see probably at least some of these. So these are the many file types you can find in the repository. So backup chain metadata, that is I would say the top three are critical files for traditional backup. Definitely the top two, and if you do incrementals, those as well. Reverse incrementals, if you're currently using them, I'm sure they are critical, although it may be good to change the setting now to get ahead of it because it will be deprecated in version 13. Open to feedback on if there are on why that would be a concern to change that in the long term, but we would definitely recommend it just because it will be deprecated in the next version. And it's basically just making it's kind of the inverse of the regular IB, so it's kind of makes the most recent backup a full backup. So anyway, so the configuration backup is the file for the Veeam configuration backup of like the SQL or PostgreSQL database that we discussed earlier. It's just a flat .bco file. Ideally, you'd want that off the Veeam server on a backup repository that is not the Veeam server, ideally, for redundancy's sake. It does store it on the C drive by default, though, so I would always recommend changing that upon initial setup. So virtual full backups for tapes, archived log backup files, Microsoft SQL transaction log backups, other different types of log backup files. The plugins have their own backup files. It just depends on which one. You wouldn't often need to see those, but unless you're just verifying that they're there, because the interface allows you to kind of abstract that so you can restore it, but it couldn't hurt to know these. The vblob, the vindex, and the vslice are related to file share or NAS backup or unstructured data backup, depending on how you define or look at it. So the blob index, it just stores data about the file share in production. The vindex, it's a metadata file that describes the backup files and like the information related to it in the versioning. Vslice is just the allocation of the data in the vblob backup file. So those three kind of work in tandem for that type of job. And those are pretty common extensions. So Looking at this image again, and what we've added is the data mover service is on backup proxy and repository. So that is true. That is basically the service. Like if you were to install a proxy on a Windows server, what Veeam is installing on that Windows server is the data mover service. So that's the idea here. Same concept here. The main thing I think we're illustrating here is with in this case with an SMB backup repository, if it's it needs something to Veeam can connect to directly, which would be the gateway server to install the data mover service, and then can offload, then can like send the data to the SMB share from there. If you're hosting an SMB share from like a Windows server, that could really be the gateway. That gateway server wouldn't be relevant. But if it's like a NAS share with running on like a Linux-based OS or something like that, where you need, that's what the gateway server comes into play. And as long as you size it appropriately to where it's not a bottleneck, it shouldn't really be an issue. So when you're doing object storage backup, whether it's cloud-based or on-prem, you can choose gateway or direct, or well, however you want to do it. I mean, gateway will basically still choose something, but that is kind of the choice you have for object storage on how you want it to go. And the main idea here is, depending on what specifically is in your environment, sometimes those two, the gateway or the backup proxy, might be the same server. It really depends what is available under the managed server section. You can either resize or change or select multiple options for the gateway. The idea is you just want to make sure that that is not your bottleneck before it sends out. And the job log should indicate that, and we can always help determine that too if there's any questions. But anytime you're trying to see like a proxy or gateway, the idea is you want to size that to where that is not what's slowing the job down. Or if it is, at least it's within your expected window. So Veeam Data Cloud Vault, which we kind of alluded to earlier, is our storage as a service solution within the Veeam Data Cloud. So Vault is like the storage, S3 storage as a service. So fully managed secure cloud object storage that eliminates unpredictable cloud cost models. That's a big one, is the flat fee, especially with the premium licensing, although they both have predictable pricing. So fully managed, we kind of refer to it as like a turnkey solution, in the sense that you don't have to worry about making sure you set up the bucket with immutability correctly or encryption correctly, or that API fees or any of that. It's all set up for you. We just give you, there's a couple different ways you can authenticate it, but just give you the information you need to authenticate to add it to the VBR server, and then it is an option to send backups to, with very predictable cost. So security immutable out of the box, and you can request to change the duration depending on what your retention was and all that stuff. But it is enabled out of the box, and it's just a support request to increase it if you need to. And yeah, immutability is just a way to stop bad actors or ransomware attackers from encrypting, deleting, or modifying your backups in any way. And any data that Veeam transfers over the WAN will be encrypted in flight. And at rest, it is by default encrypted with Veeam Data Cloud Vault. So durable, depending on the licensing, either 11 or 9, or sorry, 11 or 12 nines of durability. So it's just like the amount of nines after the 99.999% durable. So pretty durable, I would say. Predictable pricing, inclusive of storage. So this is a big one, especially with cloud. And especially with the premium, depending on your use case, and we can always discuss these things in a more custom conversation, but that is what I would think is the biggest benefit, that and security out of the box. So you don't have to worry about APIs, block generation by enabling immutability. You just put how much data, the change rate, your retention, and kind of don't have to worry about egress or any of that stuff. Very predictable, which is pretty predictable and cloud are rarely in the same sentence together. That's kind of the idea for Veeam Data Cloud Vault. All right, so getting a little more detail in between the two, these are the two licenses of Vault that you can buy. Just to kind of clarify the use case, and for a second copy of backup, so not the first thing you'd be trying to restore from, but something that you could, in a, knock on wood, but if some scenario may end up having to restore from. Foundation works better for that. It is cheaper to reflect that, and we'll kind of show why. Both use Azure Blob Cool, so the performance will be the same. No issues there. LRS versus ERS. So it is redundant, but just to essentially like that data center. 11 nines of durability, still very resilient, but just to more of like, so on like a drive failure level. There is a fair use policy for the read restore. So whatever the total capacity that you have a contract for, up to 20% of that is what you can restore or read with no added fees. Once you exceed that, then some of the fees that we incur would be passed on, and that is all documented in the fair use policy. If that is a concern, that's where the advance comes into play, because it's truly unlimited. So data locality, you can choose the country, and so that is about as specific as you can get. Although you don't have to worry about egress still, though. But you can't choose by region with foundation licensing. Both are immutable, encrypted out of the box either way. So benefits of using advanced over foundation would be extra resilient. So it's resilient to a data center failure as opposed to just drive failure. It is truly unlimited, and even easier to forecast if you see it, if it's like a primary backup, or you just see it as within the realm of possibility that you could exceed that 20%, and that would be a concern. Might be worth getting advanced, because then regardless of how much you wouldn't be charged for that, for the egress or the restore or any of those fees. And you also can choose the specific region as well. And we have a list of regions that we support with Vault that is always being updated. Like I said, both are immutable and encrypted out of the box. So it really just depends on how likely, if this is a primary or secondary type of backup, and that may determine which one you want to choose. Both great options though. So foundation, yeah, I mean, just kind of, these are just the different ways you can send the data. So they're on a backup repository using Foundation. The idea is that it's a copy job, so it wouldn't be the first thing you'd restore from, but you might need to restore from it in some scenario, especially in a secure, like a knock on wood, ransomware event. So you do the copy job from the repository to Veeam Vault. LRS, you can choose the country, always immutable, always encrypted. And so that's what that is. So the advance would be just sending it directly, and you don't necessarily have to do this, but this is just an example use case. Advance would be sending it directly to Veeam Vault, and it is zone redundant, and same Azure Blob Cool, same deal, except you can choose the specific region. So if part of your DR plan is to maybe restore to Azure, you can maybe pre-plan like your region that you're backing up to improve performance or reduce egress if you had to restore there, although you wouldn't get it with egress using Vault anyway, but that's the kind of the concept of it. So performance would be more relevant, but so you can do either of those with either type of licensing, but this is kind of gives you an idea of how you would typically use it based on the use case. So you can add it like any other repository. It does have its own section. So you can think of it as an S3 repository. We have two different options of authentication. So you would check, if you click Add Backup Repository and then Veeam Data Cloud Vault, and then you would see the screen on the right. So one option, if you were to register for Veeam Vault, you can be provided with the credentials for that, and that would be your authentication. That is an option. You can also tie it to the VBR server through the my.veeam.com portal. That's another option. I don't think that's don't think that's covered in today's call. We can discuss that in a follow-up, or if there's a Q&A question. But you have either choice, just the authentication method. And then the rest of these would look, you would just kind of choose, it's not in the screen, but it's like any other repository setting that we will look at probably here. So backup infrastructure, and these processes are the same anytime you're adding a repository. This is where it would be unique to what you're adding. So we talked about all the Veeam Data Cloud Vault. In this case, for this slide, we're going to be adding a direct attached storage. And we're choosing Windows. So it sees a C and an F drive in this example. Just kind of letting you know that. And so here's where you're choosing what it actually is. So you just choose, depending on the nature of the server and what the availability, you would choose the path to that. We kind of saw C and F. So then the current tasks, that concept that I described with the proxy is basically the same concept, especially since this is a Windows repository. Same concept applies to that in terms of like how many VM disks being sent to it. That's how many you'd want to, like that would be the bottleneck if that number is lower than what the proxy is successfully concurrently streaming to it. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but that if target is the bottleneck and your proxies are sized appropriately, and this is like set a lot lower than how many concurrent tasks you'd want to be able to and how many it can support, that's what you'd want to increase or be aware of when you're sizing. And you can limit read and write, and that, it kind of speaks for itself, and there may be several reasons why you would want to do it, but if you wanted to limit it just to ensure accuracy over performance, let's say, you can limit it. Although the limit can, yeah, it's just different ways of kind of achieving similar things. So these are settings under the advanced for the repository, and it does do a good job of checking the default settings by default. Although if you're using like a dedupe device, you may want to check that second box. And that third box, backed by rotated drives, it's essentially, it will tolerate the disappearance of previous backups, and you can choose what it will do when it notices the disappearance of previous backups. So what I mean by that is, like, if you have a Veeam full backup, and then let's say the drive is replaced in it with the same drive letter, so like it sees it, like for, as far as Veeam is concerned, it's the same repository, but it's really a different drive letter, or that file was just deleted. You can instruct on when a drive is changed, what does it do. You probably wouldn't want to continue existing. It basically like do a full backup, force it if it needs it. That's how you can ensure. That's how I see it, at least. Usually for like makeshift air gap backups, that's how you do it. Not too common, but that is a way to achieve that. Per machine backup files allows you to use the Veeam mover feature and gives you better performance during backups. I would probably, well, yeah, I mean, that's enabled by default. So that is good to do going forward. And how to add a repository. So yeah, so mount server. So this is like for file level recovery restores for Windows in this context. The Linux one kind of spins one up on the fly, or you can choose one. So the idea here is if it has like you'd want to choose the drive letter based on performance and make sure that the server overall is sized appropriately based on your expectations for file level restores. So you don't want that to be the bottleneck, is kind of the idea. And you can choose the ports too if you needed to customize them. You just click the button. Okay, so scale out backup repository. So we discussed the different types of repositories, and you can do backups and backup copies. A scale out backup repository is a way for Veeam to target from one job, one logical unit, or one logical entity that is really multiple repositories, and with different retention configured, and we will discuss that. But this is kind of just what it looks like when I said it's multiple things, but it's referring to one thing from the Veeam job. Like you would send it to a scale out, but the scale out is really a performance tier, capacity tier, and potentially even an archive tier. So multi-tier storage, performance tier is essentially where it goes first. Ideally to something that would be faster, not necessarily, but usually, because that's where you'd be restoring first. Those are the supported types of storages for that. And so, yeah, so that's kind of what that is. So then you would choose capacity tier is where it tiers off from there. And I think we will have a screen share before I get too far with that. But you can essentially tier off from capacity tier, which is object storage, and then archive tier, which is also object storage, but like the cooler version of, or the colder offline version of that. So if it's Amazon, they call it Glacier. Azure refers to their version as Azure Archive. Beam can also integrate with Azure Archive, in case you were wondering. Of course, Azure Blob can as well. And the main rule for archive tier is whatever the vendor for capacity tier, it has to match the archive tier vendor. It does say that. So how to scale out. So yeah, so here's where typically, yeah, so this is where it will initially be landing, the place where you'd want to restore from first in this multi-tiered storage system. That is the scale out backup repository. So if you click add, you'll see all your repositories that are in your Veeam environment that, yeah. So you would choose either one, and you can have multiple extents. So for load balancing purposes, or for just many different, if you're like in the process of doing a hardware refresh, different reasons you would have that, but you can do that. And then these are some options you can do as well. I would probably check those, but somewhat up to that second one. I'm just going to say I would recommend data locality unless you had multiple copies of backups, but you can choose to basically have incrementals on a different extent. Because remember how I said you can put several extents in the performance tier. So performance is basically saying put backup chains that are linked together on different repositories for the purpose of increased performance. So it could be worth it. I would just make sure you have other multiple copies if you're going to do that. And then you can kind of choose what is allowed to be on each one based on that. So it's just further customization, and then how strict the policy enforcement. I would just generally recommend data locality. It seems like most feedback I get that is the case, but you do have the option right now. So capacity tier, so this is where basically what we've described so far is basically just a Veeam repository, right? Because we had a performance tier. Now it's like, what is the second tier that it's sending it to? So you're extending it to object storage. It has to be some sort of S3 storage. That would already had to be configured, and that's where Veeam Vault is so convenient, because that part of it is kind of taken out of the equation, and you can just add it to the Veeam interface. But I mean, we are kind of the Lego solution, so you would have to already have it here though, and that's out of the screen. So I wanted to explain that. But if you click choose, or you will see what has already been added, and you can choose those buckets. And then these are kind of the transfer methods. So if you just check copy, it will every 4 hours copy whatever new files are noticed on the performance tier to mirror that into the S3 bucket that you just added. So it's essentially like having a mirror, like 2 different copies of the same backups in 2 different locations. One of them is an S3, if just copies checked. If just moves is checked, as it kind of says, it moves backups to object storage as they age out of operational restore window. And so that means a full backup would have to occur, because it can't move a file if it has dependencies with other files that are still on-prem. If you select copy and move, it's really more of the move really becomes more of delete after a certain amount of days, because it's already been moved if it's in copy mode. Hopefully that makes sense, but definitely can clarify if need be. So they are independent settings. If you check them both, since it's copying every 4 hours, you're really saying delete backups after a certain amount of days from the performance tier, because, or in this case, if you did do that, it'd probably be because you want longer term retention in the cloud. If you wanted the inverse type of retention, like longer term on-prem and short term in the cloud, you could do a backup copy too, but that's just the idea. So those are the different settings depending on, if you just want it to be the same retention across the board, I would just check copy, but you may not want that. So these are the different options. And then, like I said, anything going through the WAN, so you can try to force it sooner if it reaches capacity, depending on if it's able to. Encrypt data uploaded to object storage. So in transit, it will be either way, but it's more of like at rest. You can set window, like when it can offload. So like if that copy is checked and it's every 4 hours, you can further specify like only certain times can it actually send. The health check is like a CRC logical scan for corruption in the backup files. You can run that, and if you just select that blue hyperlink, that will basically allow you to configure that. So beyond the CRC logical check, there are more thorough checks to verify that the machine can boot, services start properly, network connectivity, heartbeat, application testing, even sandbox testing for like testing updates and stuff like that. A lot of different use cases for the virtual lab. Ensure Backup, Ensure Replica are jobs that are essentially run on top of the virtual lab within the VBR interface. So Sure Backup, it allows you to automatically perform recoverability testing, verification, and content scans for the successful for backups that exist in our repository, basically. So where it's doing it, it's performing them in a virtual lab, which is kind of that little cloud icon. That is it's a VM that is isolated from the rest of your environment, so you can test these VMs without worrying about it impacting your production environment or anything like that. So it starts them in an isolated virtual environment, does the test, and we'll kind of describe some of those tests. Mostly like heartbeat, in this context at least with Sure Backup, heartbeat, ping test. There are some scripts for certain roles like domain controller or DNS or SQL Server. And then malware scans could be good as well, depending on your licensing. And then, but there are more, just like the high level view. Perform a series of tests and send a status report to your mailbox. That's kind of what the idea is. So creating virtual lab is kind of the core of the feature that allows all the rest of this to work. Application groups is an optional setting if you need. It's basically like something like if you need a domain controller or a DNS server to boot, like in this isolated network environment, still from a backup repository. But if you need that to boot before whatever you're actually wanting to test for it to function properly, depending on what you're testing, there are scenarios where that definitely would be needed. It is optional, but sometimes it's required. You can create that too if you need to. The job itself is essentially just linking an existing job or choosing which, excluding basically, or choosing what you want to test in the Sure Backup job. Then you're choosing, now that you've chosen the scope of the workloads, you're basically choosing what you want to do with this verification job, and then you'd schedule it, and then you'd receive the report with the results. So that's pretty powerful, especially because with this on-demand sandbox option, which I think there is a slide for. So there's kind of two modes of this. The full recoverability testing is recommended, and that does require the virtual lab to be configured. And that's basically what allows you to really test that it can boot in the virtual lab. The backup verification and content scan, it can be helpful. It's good for integrity checks and malware scans and content analysis, because you can do like YAR scans or other like Veeam types of threat hunter type of things. You can use those without setting up the virtual lab. So it depends on what you're trying to do. But in most cases, if you have a requirement, or just for peace of mind, if you need to make sure that, hey, these backups say they're successful, I need to make sure they can boot and the services will start and everything works how I expect it, and I want to have a good report of that. That's where that full recoverability testing comes in handy, and it does require the virtual lab to be configured. So the full recoverability testing requires virtual lab. The backup verification and content scan and malware detection does not. So on-demand sandbox. So this is like it could be your primary use case, but or a secondary use case. Just another thing you can do with it. It allows you to keep the virtual lab running after the scheduled sure backup test. So if you wanted to console in or remote in through like a static route or something, and get into this isolated read-only mode version of it's mounting a backup file via NFS share to this virtual lab. So you can kind of do whatever you want to without much risk. And so people often use it for like testing updates would be like the most common example probably. And so you can kind of see what this is in a sandbox environment, see the impact of that change in like a sandbox environment. If it goes well, then even better. If it doesn't, then you know that, and without people getting mad. So that is helpful. And there's other use cases that are more sophisticated, but that's probably the most common. It's like testing updates or major changes to an environment that you have a backup of. So that way you at least you have peace of mind, or you at least know about a potential issue before you've done it. Beyond just the traditional testing of your backups, can it be restored? That's a nice extra use case. So immutability is a great feature for ransomware protection. It basically refers to the state of data that prevents it from being modified or deleted for a certain amount of days that you can define. That is pretty much that is accurate, and it just depends what it's integrating with and some of the nuances with that. But that is generally a true statement, and the idea behind it is like accidental deletion, malicious employees, or ransomware attackers. They, with the appropriate level of access, they would not be able to delete or encrypt or change the backups. So the benefits are it ensures integrity and security, and it provides protection against ransomware and accidental deletions. So you can achieve immutability through Amazon S3, any S3 compatible, which it would include Veeam Vault, of course. That's what that Veeam Data Cloud Vault means. So Azure Blob also, really any S3 compatible that supports immutability in the form that we need it, which any of the ones that are listed there would. So Veeam Hardened Repository is the pre-built ISO of the on-prem version of the Linux repository, so that's an option as well. It's not S3 storage, and it is on-prem, and but yeah, that's just another option for immutable using Linux. HP Store Once and Dell Data Domain, those are deduplication devices that have a native feature very similar that we can integrate with. There are other ones that we can indirectly integrate with that we will, because if it's a storage device that has that feature, that will take precedence over Veeam trying to delete it. But it is more seamless if both of those devices are aware of each other and you can configure it through Veeam. But that's just what I figured I'd mention those two for that reason. So those are the different things you can do with the different ways you can achieve immutability. So we're looking at a Veeam. So this is like a specific example of one of those types. So this is like Veeam Hardened Repository. So basically a Linux server that you're adding as a repository that has immutability. So this is like not an optional setting. It has to be single-use credentials for security reasons, so that's a good thing. So you'd want a temporarily elevated account, and this is like if you're not using the pre-built ISO. So Veeam Backup Replication does not store these credentials in the database. That's important to remember. If we do it, we don't store it there for security reasons to really ensure there's no way that root account can be compromised from Veeam. The flip side is I would just make sure you have that account documented in case you needed it. If you actually set immutability too high, it's something like that where like it's a legit reason to make that change. That password's the only thing that can do it. We don't store it in our database to avoid any issues. So yeah, it must be a non-root account, because and that kind of was the whole single use credentials that we discussed. So yeah, so so if you did that and you didn't have, like, if basically if you go to the next tab and you don't get an error, then that is good, and you can essentially, well, actually, that really, this next tab is where you find that out. But this is the following tab where you'd set, if you want to do fast cloning, depending on if the file system is using XFS, which we do recommend. And then you can choose to make the recent backups for X amount of days. So that's the idea there. The longer you go back, the more, in theory, you'd be protected against certain types of more sophisticated malware, but it just depends on how it fits in your environment or what your budget is or so on. Oops. So yeah, I mean, most of these settings are the same. That's the key setting. And if you click next on this and don't get an error, then that's, especially with the Linux hardened repository, that ensures that you configured it correctly on that side. So now we're looking at a different example. So this is an S3 bucket. They would all kind of look the same. In this case, it looks like it is a Amazon S3 bucket, but same or similar concepts for all of them. This screen would look basically the same. So you would choose the data center or region, the bucket, the folder. If you wanted to limit the max amount of storage consumption, that can be helpful. You can also set you set your backups immutable for X amount of days. Same concept that we've been describing for other forms of storage. That this is just talking about for the S3 bucket version of it. Use infrequent access storage class. That can be cheaper in some cases, usually for like long-term backups, but in some cases it actually is more expensive, or yeah, it can be more expensive for short-term deletion with the early deletion fees. So if you would want to strategically check that, and same code, and it goes for the bottom one, and we can always do a health check or have a custom conversation to figure out what would make sense. But it's usually like, I mean, it kind of says it right there, avoid using it for short-term storage if you don't want the higher cost. But for long-term, it's better. For long-term, you may have some cost savings, but at a certain point, archive tier might be a better way to go if you're not worried about it. So different types. Oh, so changing gears a bit. So storage integrations. We talked about transport modes, which kind of are related, but this is a little bit different. This is about reducing the impact and the load on the VMs during the snapshot creation or the consolidation process, among other things. Like, or could also orchestrate snapshots or use NAS filers. So here are the different types by category. So VMware integration will back up VM vSphere VMs, which you can do without the integration. We'll discuss what that means in a further slide, but it reduces VM stun is the benefit. Orchestrate snapshots across storage arrays, and just snapshot orchestration, generally speaking, through Veeam. Restore data from storage snapshots. Yeah, that's kind of what I was referring to there. So you can, if it's you can trigger a snapshot from the storage device that's stored there, but you can store it through Veeam, as well as the Veeam proprietary backup file. So it's like true single pane of glass if you have an integration there. NAS integration, kind of similar. Like if we were kind of talking about earlier for the file share backups, if you have like a NetApp hosting a share, you can connect the NAS filer, and you'll have improved performance and less impact on that file share. Like if people are using it during the day when there's backups, that would be like an ideal time to use that. Or if you just have it and want to take advantage of it. Veeam agent for Windows integration, just, if you have a supported storage, or I mean, if you have Windows that is connected to, like, it is ultimately stored on a supported SAN, you can use that and use and have the benefits of that integration. So this one, this is storage volume snapshot. So basically, whether it's a VM, file share, agent for Windows, going from top to bottom, the storage system is like the production storage where the backup, or where the production system lives. Within that, abstracted is the storage volume. Veeam will create the storage volume snapshot, or instruct the storage system to create the snapshot. Temporarily copy it to another place, like another location on the array, and then delete that after. So then it doesn't have to have the same level of VM stun, basically, and that's kind of better described here, I would say. So the main thing is, if you didn't have storage integration, it would look like the left image, and that snapshot commit for high change rate servers, you can result in VM stun, sometimes even going offline for a short period of time in extreme examples. If you have the integration, because it copies it over to the storage snapshot, like to the storage array, another location temporarily, and then closes the snapshot, you don't have the snapshot open throughout the entire backup. So it greatly reduces the stun on the VM. And then it just deletes that storage snapshot at the very end on the right side. So that is ideal if you have it. And it is already enabled from the job. And if you have a storage system that is compatible with the particular type of feature that you're trying to use, you basically just need to go to storage infrastructure in the bottom left quadrant, click add storage, choose the type of storage that you want to choose, and there is a link. We can share the link, but if you type like Veeam Alliance, like integration storage directory, you'll probably find it. Anyway, so these are the list here, and we can always help if you're trying to figure out if your device is on the list or planning to get one, that is. But these work really well, and there is more that are outside of the screen. But so in this case, we're choosing NetApp. Those are the different makes or the different models and protocols that are compatible in the context of Veeam, what it can use. So you would choose the IP address of the management server of the array, choose the role, and whether it's like block storage for a Windows server, or in this example, or if it's block or file storage for VMware, or NAS filer in the example that I mentioned earlier. So you can choose, and it can be more than one. You would need to authenticate, of course, over a port that is able to communicate over. Then you would choose the protocol. So in this tab, it's kind of referencing that top checkbox that's checked, is what this tab is. So you would choose the protocol that the data stores were configured on or configured to use, and then kind of go from there. So then that's basically how it's able to see and integrate through the NetApp, so it's less reliant on just VMware API calls when doing the backup. Which, I mean, that works pretty well too, but this has the benefit of reducing the VMs down in the snapshot orchestration and other things too. So you can choose and I think each one. So the volume to scan, I mean, that's just what you want to scan. Backup proxies to use, either one or more than one, depending on if you wanted to load balance. That's kind of just highly situational, but that is relevant. Mount server, kind of similar concept, is just something that you don't want to be the bottleneck for file level recoveries. So same but different in the sense that, like, so this is when we add it for the NAS filer. So if you were in this context, the assumption is it's hosting VMs and NFS shares, which is fine, and we can work with that. So that's why it has two different tabs based on what was checked. So NAS filer, in this case, NFS is the share of the file share. Choose your volumes, same concept for proxies. And then this is enabled by default, but just in case someone changed it, or just want to make sure, if you go to it, if you edit a job, like a backup job that is relevant to the storage integration that we've been discussing, if you go to the storage tab, the advanced button in the bottom right, and then click the integration tab, you will see the screen. It will already be checked most likely, but just to verify, that is what that is. You can limit if you needed to limit that. You can, and you can also fail over to standard backup. I would so same to that other failover concept. This is just my personal opinion. Once you verify that it does work, and that's the key thing, is to make sure it works before checking that box. But once you verify it does, I probably would fail over to standard backup. So that way, if there's an issue with the SAN, you still get some form of backup. Otherwise, it'll just hard fail if it can't do the more advanced integration. Which, I mean, it depends on what your beliefs or policy is. But I just wanted to add that. So backup from from secondary storage snapshot. So this is similar, but a little bit different in what it's actually doing. So the idea here is, so in the production side, this is assuming there is a replicated array of storage systems. So you want to still have the Veeam resiliency of that VBK, or the proprietary file format that can be copied to other storages or restored to other platforms. That's the benefit, other than just having a snapshot. But you also have the secondary storage snapshot, so might as well use the replicated one as the source for Veeam to copy from, or you have the option to, at least if the sync schedules frequently enough. So the benefit there is you still get the best of both worlds, in the sense of like having your normal storage replication with the Veeam proprietary format and its portability and resiliency. And you also don't have to use your primary storage volume as the source that it's backing up from. So people may not even notice it, but it is happening. That's the idea. That's possible if it is a compatible storage device and fits this configuration. So now we're going to talk about tape briefly. So Veeam supports native tape operations, linear tape open 3 through 9. Various IBM libraries are also supported. Basically just needs a Windows driver to communicate with the tape device or tape library. And at that point, then it can kind of fit into Veeam as a tape server. So the purpose of it, long-term data archiving and or compliance requirements, often cost savings. Backup strategy, here's 2, 3, 2, 1, 3 copies, 2 media types, 1 offsite location. Supported data types for archiving, and so this is what you can actually, what Veeam can send to tape. So obviously, of course, VM backups, physical machine backups, really more than that, but just for the context of this conversation, entire backup repositories, including hardened Linux repositories, unstructured data, which would include storage devices via NDMP, SMB, NFS, object storage. That is licensed a little bit differently, but you can do it though. And so this is basically like the diagram of that. So the idea is you have the tape library that really is doing most of the tape operations, but then you get the benefit of having the single pane of glass with Veeam, and having the granularity of configuration and API control to send ejection commands and so on to the tape library if you need to or want to. So basically, we need to connect either over Fiber Channel or SAS to the Windows server that we are calling the tape server, or it can be a dedicated server, depending on how many tape jobs you do. You probably would want to have a dedicated tape server, but it's kind of more of a case-by-case thing. But it is called the tape server when you add it as such, even if it's the same server as VBR. So that's the concept, or that's the idea. And then once you add it as a tape server, then it's kind of part of the Veeam components. And then you get to like media pools and configuration from there. But moving on to WAN Accelerator, so that is a feature that basically allows you to enhance backup and replication and backup copy processes by leveraging, or not really backup copy, but backup and replication by leveraging multiple advanced techniques aimed at minimizing data transfer volumes, thereby increasing efficiency over WAN links. So it's just like an extra device on the source and target end, or maybe devices, that does extra compression and dedupe so that less data is ultimately being sent over the wire on the other side. So yes, remote, yeah, so backup copy job or replication. That's what I meant to say. Network traffic compression, multi-streaming upload, global data dedupe, that's the big one, global data dedupe. Variable block size deduplication. So the combination of all those different things allows extra compression and dedupe, as much as you can do through software, basically. So and there are 2 modes for it, kind of as it states, whether it's 100 megabits or whether your upload speed is either typically upload at the source side, at least upload. If it's if it's more than 100 megabits, we'd recommend using high bandwidth mode, or if not, low bandwidth mode. And that is the idea. So to configure that, you would go to the same backup infrastructure section, and WAN Accelerators has its own area on the left pane. So you would right click in the white, or if you click Add WAN Accelerator, kind of near the top left, that will open this. And so whether or not, kind of how we said earlier, depending on what your link speed is, given the context if this is source or target side, you would check the box based on what's appropriate. The streams, you probably would want to increase that to the point of either diminishing returns or other business units saying you're saturating their WAN links. I say that jokingly, but that's probably how you would think about it, as much as you can before it's becoming useless or affecting other users. And so traffic port, you can choose the port. So the cache, it's kind of an overflow, recommending at least 10 gigabytes per type of operating system. Like Windows would have its own, or Linux would have its own. So yeah, the larger cache improves the data reduction ratio, but requires faster storage to really take advantage of it. So that's kind of what that is, kind of a memory overflow, and then just reviewing everything. So it's kind of telling you what it's about to do now that you've confirmed it, or now that you've configured it. So it's going to it looked at the device in this. I mean, this is just an example, but the transport mode or transport service was already installed. It's going to install the WAN accelerator because that's what we're talking about. So that makes sense. So after you've installed, let's say that completes successfully, so then you have that added as a WAN accelerator. Now we're looking at a backup copy job. So this is where you would put that to use. So if you click that box or the radio button for the through built-in WAN accelerators, then you would basically choose one for the source and WAN site. And replication, same concept, but this is where you would do it for that type of job. And on that note, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Esteb, and we'll take it from here. Thanks.
All right. Hope everybody can hear me. If you can, please give a thumbs up. I'm about to share my screen and let me know when you're able to see it as well. Perfect. All right. So I'm going to take over from here. I'm going to be talking about Enterprise Manager, about creating backup jobs, how to do restores, as well as just discussing a bit of security best practices. So we'll start with Enterprise Manager. So Enterprise Manager is a free software that helps you manage multiple Veeam Backup Replication servers. So let's say you have a bigger environment where you you know you have uh, multiple Veeam servers based on locations. For example, you have one server in Europe, one server in the US, and you want to manage everything under a single pane of glass. That's where you will be using Enterprise Manager. It will help with seeing everything on one single pane of glass, manage your license better, and overall just do better management and administration of the jobs and servers and some recovery operations and things like that. The software itself is on the same ISO as the Veeam Backup Replication server, and it's completely free, no matter what type of license you have. For best practice, it is advised to install it on a dedicated server, but just know that you can always install it on the same server as Veeam Backup Replication if you don't have enough resources. So the installation process is pretty straightforward. You will have a system configuration check done, and Veeam will advise to or will prompt you to download any um, missing software. You will be prompted to also add your license, but you can skip that step and do it later. You can install this on using a PostgreSQL server database or Microsoft SQL Server database. You can use an existing instance of those two databases, or you can choose to deploy it on a new instance. So this is an overview of how Enterprise Manager access or connects to other components. So you will be able to first open the Enterprise Manager console, or you'll be able to use a web console to access it. um, Veeam Enterprise Manager will use the enterprise database, the manager database, to connect to VMware. to collect data, as well as use the same instance to collect data from the Veeam Backup Replication servers that you have. So technically, the green lights are um, the green arrows shows how the data collection is done, which direction it's going, and for anything such as task that the enterprise manager is executing, it will forward it to the Veeam Backup Replication servers. This is an overview of the UI of the Enterprise Manager console. You will see a summary of the jobs that are running, whether they are for VMs, file shares, physical machines. You will have an overview of the data, the amount of data that is being processed, the amount of file data, how many runs, how many jobs have run for the past 24 hours, and just a quick overview of the status of those jobs. If you click on job, you will be able to see them. There's some light management that you can do on Enterprise Manager. You can stop the job, you can start them, you can disable them, you can create an active full, or you can delete them. You can also clone them. Under machines, you will be able to do some restore operation. Here you'll see the machines that are being backed up, how many restore points are available, where they are stored, and if you click on any of them, you will have more options to restore them, including doing an instant recovery, an entire VM recovery, sometimes a virtual disk restore. You will be able to leverage application item restores as well. So the same way that you're able to restore application objects for SQL, Oracle, PostgreSQL, you'll be able to do some restore of those objects from this console, from the Enterprise Manager console. Under the configuration tab, you'll be able to add the backup servers that you want to monitor. You'll be able to add the host environments as well. So Veeam allows you to pretty much give rights to a user that has local administrator right on a certain machine to be able to do file level restore. So you'll be able to provide them with a UI, a web UI, as long as they have you've added them to the Enterprise Manager console and give them access. They'll be able to restore data themselves from that machine. Veeam is also great for role-based access. So there's a couple of roles that you'll be able to create and provide and assign users to. There's a portal admin role that has full access to all available operations on Enterprise Manager. There's a portal users where you can limit operations such as restore scope on specific machines, quick backup for machines, restore operation, detailed, delegated and detailed restore operations, or you can just allow them to view a few dashboards and things like that. So there's a portal administrator, a portal user, and a restore operator. You'll be able to add them per users, per groups, and you'll be able to assign them a role. Veeam also allows you to restore data that is encrypted in case you lose the password or your KMS server is not working. It does this by using a special set of keys, a public key to encrypt stuff on the backup server, and a private keys that can unlock your data. Basically, if you ever run into password problems, you will be able to get your data back. And that is managed on this window over here. Finally, Veeam is a great tool to manage your licenses. um, it reduces administration overhead when it comes to licenses, for example, and simplifies it essentially. For example, if you do have two Veeam Backup Replication server and you're not using Enterprise Manager, you will be able to um, only see the licenses that are being used on the server that you're looking at. So let's say you're logging into Veeam server number 1 and you go to the license tab, you will only be able to see how many licenses are being used by that server. If the same license file, let's say 10, that has 10 licenses, is using 2 licenses on server 1 and 6 licenses on server 2, when you log into server 1, you'll only be able to see that Veeam is using 2 licenses. On an enterprise manager, you'll be able to see how many licenses are used by each server. You'll also be able to generate a simple report that will give you an overview of how the licenses are being used. I'm going to skip the break and go right into it. Second section will be discussing the main menu. So when you click on the 3-bar menu, all the way on the top left corner, you will have access to a few uh, tabs to better configure the Veeam server. The first one will be the credential and password tab. That's where you can create and manage credentials password for the infrastructure components, for Veeam's infrastructure components. So here on the data center credentials, you will be able to manage and add credentials to connect to your Microsoft Windows Server, vCenter Server, EXSI host, a VM running Microsoft Windows OS, storage systems, and other things. You have a tab for cloud credentials, which will do sort of the same thing, but for um, clouds instances, AWS. So if you're sending your backup to an object storage in AWS, you'll be able to manage the credential for that. Same thing for Azure, Google Cloud, and also Cloud Connect, our private cloud providers option. You will also have a tab for encryption password management. So this will include um, any encryptions, credential, passwords, as well as the ones that are managed by a KMS server. Second on the tab, there's users and roles. You can specify users and admin users that will be accessing the console and manage their credential. You'll be able to add them per group or individually under the domain dash username format. So here you can see a few users groups that were added. On the same page, you'll be able to see, you'll be able to assign multi-factor authentication to them, which we can discuss a bit further. But you'll be able to just click on that button right here and add them under the domain user slash dash username format or browse them. Veeam also offers you um, roles, and you'll be able to assign those roles to the users. So there's a restore operator roles to restore, to allow for restoration process. backup operator roles to start, stop backups, export, copy backup, and create Veeam zip backup. You have an admin role that allows you to do everything really on the backup server. You have a tape operator role that is limited to tape operation, and a backup viewer that has a read-only access to the console. All right, still on that same menu, you have a network traffic rule tab, and this pretty much allows you to control rules um, over, I mean, to uh, edit and change rules to allow you to throttle network traffic and encrypt transfer data. The rules apply only to traffic sent between the backup infrastructure components. And by default, Veeam will use multi-threading connection to pretty much improve performance. Multi-threading allows software to do more in less time, thanks to the modern multi-core CPU, uh, which results in faster and more efficient performance. But you can disable it if your network cannot handle multiple connections or adjust to the number of these connections. You can change the IP range of the source and target and configure the network encryption. You can also select when you want these rules to apply. For encryption, just make sure that you have enough resources at the source. Veeam allows you to use preferred network for backup and replication traffic. And this could be useful if you have a non-production network and you want to route your data through that instead of the production network. To define those network, you will have to create a list of them. And if for any reason those networks cannot be used, Veeam is going to fail over to your production network. We have a global exclusion tab that allows you to exclude VMware or Microsoft Hyper-V or your host VMs. And Veeam is going to exclude those even if they are a part of your backup, even if they're selected in the backup. So this is just done globally instead of at the job level. We have an option tab that allows you to further manage resources on the data store. So it is important to optimize resources on the data store so that backup and restore operations run smoothly. But in addition to that, just making sure that you have enough space and stuff like that, Veeam allows you to monitor and limit the read latency on the production data store during backups and restore jobs. And it uses real-time metrics from the hypervisor to do that. It can also limit assignments of new tasks to a certain I/O threshold or decrease recovery of write speed on the data store. So this is all to just allow a better flow of data, backup and transfer during the operations. You can configure those options for individual data stores. Veeam allows you to send emails containing daily reports on the status of your backup jobs. As of now, we support SMTP, Google Gmail, Microsoft 365. You can specify the email recipients, email address of the sender, what the report should contain, when to send those reports, and also exactly what you want to display on those reports. You can also get some notifications about the storage. So, for example, if your storage has less than 10, your backup storage has less than 10% of free space, which is not recommended. You always kind of want to have a margin of free space, preferably 20% on the backup storage. You can get an alert on that directly from the Veeam console. If the production storage is also running low on disk space, it will send you an alert. You can choose to skip VMs processing when the free space is at a certain percentage. And you can also get some notifications about your license support, expiration, and product, your hypervisor updates. We have a session history notification, a history tab, history window that shows you uh, anything that really happened on the Veeam Backup Replication server, and you can limit the number of sessions that are shown on the history tab, as well as how much of them are kept. Veeam also allows you to open a remote desktop connection to the backup server using PowerShell or the PUTTY utility, and open the interactive documentation of REST API for the backup server directly from the console. And that's done here. The configuration backup is the backup of your Veeam server. So we don't advise to back up the Veeam server with the Veeam console. That's not good practice. So instead, we have a configuration backup that allows you to create a backup job within this tab for the Veeam server. The configuration backup is going to allow you to choose to select a storage. This storage should be a storage that is safe, that is secure, and that will not be impacted if the Veeam server was to go down. So by default, when you do not do any change on the configuration backup tab, Veeam is going to send it on the default repository that was created when you install the backup server. The default repository is on the Veeam Backup Replication server. So you just want to make sure you get in there and select a dedicated storage that won't be impacted if the Veeam server was to go down, because we are trying to restore the Veeam server. You will be able to select retention and the number of restore points to keep, and how at what time exactly this configuration backup should run. There is a backup now button that allows you to back up the data now. Once you just get to this window, and you'll be able to encrypt the data as well, which is what is recommended. This is one of the encryption that could be restored by Enterprise Manager if you ever lose the password. When it's time to restore, so you will do this, or you will leverage this most of the time if you need to do a migration from an old server, let's say, to the new Veeam 13 um, uh, version. So once that's released, hopefully in a few months, if you want to upgrade the Veeam server, you can just download the Veeam 13 on a different server and use this configuration backup to restore into that new server. So that's one scenario where you could use this. Or, of course, when a disaster strikes, the Veeam Backup Replication server is not available anymore. You can just download a new version of, download the Veeam server again and use that configuration backup to restore your data. I mean the Veeam server. You will be doing that on the same page. So once you have access to once you access the new server, you will come in here and just click restore and select the reason why you're doing this restore, either a migration or restore of or disaster recovery restore. Next, we will be talking about jobs. So jobs are a bunch of um, data management tasks, including backup, replications, restore operations, that allows you to automate the process of protecting your data, to make sure that things are done regularly, reliably, to of course you know protects against disaster and loss or corruption. We have a resource scheduler that identify the priority of those jobs and use resources, free resources, based on that priority, those priorities. This is the list of the jobs, and in order of priority, we have first the data restore jobs. Those are the highest priority and are the first one to get free system resources. Continuous data protection policies, which is a part of our replication jobs. Background system jobs such as snapshot deleter, quick backup jobs, high priority jobs. So when you create a backup job, you have the option to check a box and make that specific job high priority over the rest of your jobs. Regular backup jobs and replication jobs, backup copy job and archive jobs in last position. So this illustrates how the backup process works. First, you have the Veeam Backup service um, that creates a backup manager process for each job, the configuration database that is used to read job settings from. Once it does those first two operations, it will then communicate with the data mover regarding data transfer. The Veeam server requests the hypervisors to create a point-in-time copy of the VM, and the data backup is started using the backup proxy and the data mover to transfer the data from production to to the target. This shows the steps of creating a backup job. First, you will be giving it a name and a description. You can select this checkbox to make this backup a high priority job. You can add the machines that you want to back up per host, VMs, per data store, per tags, per combinations of tags. If you need to do an exclusion, there is an exclusion tab. You will be able to add the VMs that you want to exclude. Let's say if you select a host, you'll be able to add VMs to exclude from that host, and you'll be able to also exclude them per disk or per template. Veeam will show you an up and down arrow to change the position of the server you want to back up. The backups will be done from top to bottom. On this step, you will be able to select the proxy to use to run this job. You can do an automatic selection or specify the proxy you want to use. And you'll be able to select the storage where you want to send the backup to. Again, we are storage agnostic, which means that you can use really anything that looks like a storage. You're able to add them to Veeam. Next, you will be setting up the retention, which you can do in days or restore points. You have the options to select GFS backups. GFS backups are going to create additional full backups that will be kept on the backup chain or on the side if the uh, the age of these full GFS or uh, have expired the retention. So when it's still a part of the GF of the backup chain, Veeam is just going to put a flag on it. And once the backup chain, or once the again the age of these GFS fools have expired, the backup chain, they're too old to be left in the backup chain. Veeam is just going to put them on the side. You can create weeklies, monthlies, and yearlies fools. You can click on the advanced section to get a bit deeper into the configuration of the jobs you want to create. The first tab is going to show you the type of jobs that you can create. I mean, the backup mode that you can create, that you can leverage. You can use an incremental forward or incremental forever forward backup mode. The reverse incremental is going to be depreciated very soon, so this will be only option. The incremental will create a full at first, and then we'll create incremental for uh, following that full. Every time it comes across um, a day when an active full or a synthetic full should be created, then it will add a full to the backup chain. You can opt out of this one, of creating a full on the backup chain. Then your backup chain will be called a forever forward incremental. And when you add a full um, weekly or monthly, it will be called forward incremental. It is advised to put weekly fulls on your backup chain because when it's time to do a restore, Veeam is going to merge the first full with however incremental you want to up to the however many incremental up to the restore points that you want to restore from. So let's say you have a backup chain of 7 days. On the first day, on Monday, you have a full created, and then you have incrementals all the way to Sunday. If you want to restore data on Wednesday, Veeam is going to merge the full on Monday with the incremental on Tuesday with the incremental on Wednesday to give you a full restore from on Wednesday. If one of the incremental is corrupted, then if let's say Tuesday is corrupted, then you won't be able to restore on Wednesday. So that's why it's important to have fulls on your backup chain, especially if you have a longer backup chain, like 30 days, 20 days or more, to be able to have a full to rely on to do those merge. The difference between a synthetic and an active full is synthetic will grab the incremental that you already have in the repository and generate a full, and active full will just pull the data from production. So the synthetic is going to put a load on the repository, and the active full will put a load on the production environment. You can perform a backup health check to verify that uh, the backup file is not corrupted. This can impact the backup a little bit. So what I usually advise is just to run this, see how it impacts the jobs, and from there you can select if you want to do it more often. You can also remove deleted data on the backup end after a certain number of days. So that would be more like uh, if you have some machines that you deleted on the front end, on the production end, or some data that you deleted, Veeam is going to remove them on the backups as well to make space after a certain number of days. Um, the backup jobs constantly transform the full backup file in the backup chain to meet your retention policy. The transformation process have a side effect that essentially make the full backup file large and fragmented. Okay, so the operation of reading and writing data to and from and the backup files becomes slow. To resolve this problem, Veeam allows you to periodically defragment and compact the full backup file and clean it essentially and makes the whole operation smoother. So this is what this is right here. On the maintenance tab, oh sorry, never mind. We talked about this. On the storage tab, you have a couple of options. All of this is to increase performance of your backup. So by default, Veeam um, does deduplicate the data before storing them into the backup repository. Um, if you want to exclude that, but this is all to, of course, make the backup faster by not copying the same block of data, but you can disable it here. Swap files are NTFS MFT file on the VM with Microsoft Windows that are dynamic and that change intensively between the backup job sessions. So processing those files can take a long time and reduce the job performance. That's why it's checked by default, but you can uncheck it, of course. And deleted file block is kind of like the same thing. It's just improve the performance, but you can also uncheck it. You can select a specific compression level. Um, Veeam compression levels are pretty good. So by default, when you select optimal, you can get 50 to 75% of the data compressed, depending on what type of data it is. Files do compress better than video, for example, but you'll be able to select even more compression. Storage optimization is the size of the block of data that's being transferred over the backups. The replications, you can also change that, but 1 MB is recommended. The bigger or the smaller the files, the more metadata you will have. So you just have to take that into consideration. You can also enable file encryption here. And this is also a place where you can leverage Enterprise Manager to recover the password in case you lose it. Notification tab is for the job, not it's not done at the global level. So there's we went through how to configure this at the global level. This will be just for the job itself. The vSphere tab talk about VMware tool quiescence as well as change block tracking. Quiescence is the um, process of stopping the machine in order to create a snapshot. Veeam does it by default, but for machines that do not um, leverage VMware tool quiescence or the Veeam tool quiescence, you can enable it here. And then CBT allows you to make the backup a bit quicker, improve the performance of the backup process. Veeam leveraged the one on VMware, but when it's disabled or it's not available, let's say you're running an earlier version of VMware, Veeam uses a similar technology to perform the same work. So you can just you know check or uncheck it based on what version you have, or if it's working for you. If it's not working for you, backup from storage snapshots are a way to uh, improve the backup process when you are using SANs that have an integration with Veeam Backup Replication. What happens is Veeam is able to bypass the host, access the storage directly, and create a snapshot at the storage level. This, in returns, creates a quicker backup and a more consistent one that is less prone to errors. So by checking this here, you're able to create a backup from a storage snapshot, but the SAN itself, the storage, needs to be integrated with Veeam. Um, so technically, you don't necessarily need to use this if your jobs are running well. But let's say you have a big machine that creates a lot of problems every time it runs a backup job. It takes a long time to run the job, something like that. You can leverage this, and your job should be quicker. Um, you have further options here. You can limit the process of VM counts per storage snapshots. Failover to standard backup if this doesn't work for any reason, or failover to primary storage snapshot if the the backup from secondary storage snapshots fails. You can also leverage scripts here. Veeam allows you to leverage application or processing to create transactionally consistent backup for VM running VSS compatible applications. So for Exchange, SharePoint, Active Directory, Oracle, PostgreSQL, Veeam allows you to create not only a crash consistent backups, but also an application or consistent backup of the data at flights, which in return allows you to restore those applications very granularly. So you'll be able to uh, navigate objects within the application and restore them granularly. Those objects are going to be displayed very similar to what they look like within the application itself. You will be able to edit the line about application over processing for the machine. For SQL, Postgre, Oracle, you'll be able to go a bit further and backup transaction logs. So this page right here, we'll just discuss whether you want to do that or not really. Um, so not to get into the details of this, but technically this will allow you to decide if you want to do application or process, um, to if you want to just proceed with the um, if you want to require a successful processing to continue running this, or if to stop it if it's not processing. Um, there's a little section about persistent guest agents. This has to do with security and some VSS settings. On the SQL tab, you'll be able to specify if you want to do to truncate your logs to prevent them from growing forever. Not to truncate logs if you are, for example, using some tier application to do the backup of transaction logs or to back them up periodically. You have the same option, similar option for Oracle and PostgreSQL. You can also exclude here some files, and you can use script. All right, enable guest file system indexing was originally a way to restore, well, to use some indexing and restore files on any VMs that you're backing up. So you can do this by default for any machine that you're backing up. You can leverage guest file restore to index or to search for any files or folders and restore them individually. This here, when you check this box, allows you to search and restore across multiple VMs or across multiple Veeam Backup Replication servers. You will need Enterprise Manager, so this is one of the functionality of Enterprise Manager to restore this that way. So if you want to just search across multiple VMs, but it's also being used today to search for suspicious file. So it's always good to check this box. To leverage app aware, you have to choose a guest interaction proxy, which can be the Veeam Backup Replication server, and you have to, of course, add credential for the OS. You can test credential right away. Make sure that this is working before you go forward. But this page will finally just allow us to choose a schedule for when this job should run and how often it should retry if it fails. You can also choose which the window for which you'll be able to run this job, and terminate the job if it doesn't run during that window. Once you click run the job, when I click finish or finish, the job will be created and it will start running. All right, let's take a 5-minute break. All right, we are back. All right, now we're going to talk about restore options with Veeam. So Veeam gives you a lot of ways to restore your data. This is done on purpose. This is so that you have different ways to restore in case maybe one doesn't work or there's one that is um, better fit for the scenario, the situation. In first, we have the entire VM restore, which allows you just to restore the entire machine. Instant VM recovery is uh, the faster option to restore your data if you need to restore it as fast as possible. There's a virtual disk restore, an instant disk restore recovery where you're restoring the disk but very quickly. VM file restores for VMDKs or VHDX. Guest file restore to restore one file, one folder from the machine. Application item restore is to restore objects within a specific application, such as Active Directory, SQL. Restore to Amazon EC2, Azure, Google C, Google Cloud. This allows you to restore from any location into the cloud. Restore to Nutanix CHV or to the other hypervisor that we support. So you can restore from, Windows machine to like a physical Windows machine to uh, VMware, Hyper-V, Nutanix environments. Vice versa, you can restore from VMware to Hyper-V. You can export the content as virtual disk and you can publish them. So instant recovery is the quickest way to do restores. Veeam achieved this. It achieves a speed of like recovery in minutes, literally, by leveraging the backup file while it's still residing in the backup repository, mounting it to a server, and spinning that up in your production environment. All right. Once that's done, you will see your VM running again. Because of this process, because it's mounting it before migrating the data, it's very quick. It's very, very fast. Now, once you do that, Veeam is going to prompt you to do the migration, but it will be done after your VM is back and running, after you would have resumed working on it, if that makes sense. It also allows you, like I was saying earlier, to restore from a backup that was done on a physical machine, let's say, to a VM, including all of the VM that we support, the hypervisor host that we support. So from physical to VMware, Hyper-V, from VMware to Hyper-V, from Hyper-V to VMware, Proxmox, or Nutanix. So this is the process of running Hyper-V. I'm sorry, instant VM recovery. Veeam leverages vPower to mount the backup file while it's still compressed and deduplicated to the production host. And once the VM is running, Veeam is going to prompt you to do uh, migration of that backup file to complete the operation and get a full VM recovery. One thing to know about instant VM recovery, it's also that it can be used to test your backup manually. If you need to do a testing, Veeam is just going to, I mean, you can sort of leverage instant VM recovery, but just make sure to prevent the running of your VM to overwrite the original machine that you have in production. You can do that by disabling network cards or by running uh, instant VM recovery in a different host. Then you'll be able to test very quickly your backups, okay? Because the whole process is very quick, and uh, you don't have to do the migration because you're just testing it. You're not doing a full recovery. You can just abort the whole process. You can cancel the process. So instant VM recovery can be used to also quickly manually test your backups. Um, Veeam also allows you to restore into the cloud. into Azure, into Google. When it runs this operation into Amazon and Google, it deploys a helper appliance that is only alive for the duration of the restore process. Then it removes it immediately after that. It's optional. The helper appliance is optional, but it's heavily recommended to use it to better performance. For Azure, it does the same thing. Um, that one is actually mandatory, and its persistence is just turned on when you run this operation, and then it's turned off after the restoration has processed. Guest file restores allows you to restore any files, any folders within the operating system. It allows you to restore any of the following supported file systems: FAT, FAT32, NTFS or EFS, Linux, X2, X3, X4, Razor FS, GFX, XFS, PTRFS, NTFS, PSD Mac Solaris are also supported. It leverages a mount server, and yeah, you can use this for any uh, jobs such as backups, replicas, storage snapshot jobs, Nutanix AHV snapshots. In order to do a restore from um, an application item restore, so from Active Directory, SQL, PostgreSQL, where you're able to see the objects and restore them granularly, you just have to click on Restore Application Items. Uh, if you remember, during the job creation, we have to check a box that applies application item on the job and the machines that are running on that job. Then we just get to the restore um, um, part, select the job that we want to restore using this, and click Restore Application Items. What's going to happen is Veeam has these tools called um, Explorer. So we have Explorer for each of these applications here. And it will just show you a page that looks very similar to what you would see in the original application and allow you to navigate objects within them and restore them granularly. For example, here we are looking at the Explorer tool um, for Exchange, and it allows you to navigate mailboxes, find an inbox, look into that inbox, and restore at each level all the way to the email itself. These are the options to restore the email. You can restore it back to the original Exchange server, to a different one. You can export the PSD file, save the MSG file, or send it as an email. We will see step by step what the restore process looks like on the Veeam console. So let's say we want to do an entire VM restore. We'll select we'll go under the backup tab here. Click on disk for the local copy, the local backup. Veeam will list all of the jobs that we backed up. Within those jobs, we'll be able to extend this arrow and see the machines within the job. Once we click on the machine, then we'll see all these options to restore. If you want to do a restore of the entire VM, we'll just click on entire VM here, or do the right click, restore entire VM, and Veeam will open this window. We will be able to click on the machine itself and on points where Veeam will show all the restore point available that we have for these machines. So this is all the backups files that are available. You can see increments, fulls. The one with W means that it's a weekly GFS. So you'll be able to choose which restore point to restore from. You can restore to the original location. you can restore to a new location. You can do a stage restore. Um, the stage restore just means that Veeam will allow you to do some change on the machine, on the backup file before you do the restore. We also have a quick backup, quick rollback that allows you to restore very quickly by restore only change blocks. And this should be used when it's a problem with the guest OS, not when you have a problem with hardware or storage issue with the hardware or the storage. Here you'll be able to select the host to restore to, sorry. You'll be able to change the resource pool, select that. You'll be able to select the data store to restore to. You'll be able to use the type of disk to select the type of disk to restore to. You will be able to select a folder or change the folder, rename it, and you'll be able to restore VM tags. Same thing for the network. You'll be able to select the network, and you'll be able to disconnect it before you restore. Under Secure Restore, Veeam will allow you to do a scan of the backup file before you do a restore using an antivirus or Yara rules. You can also select a few options on how you want to restore in case a malware is found. Once you give your reasons to restore, Veeam is gonna give you a summary of the settings that you selected and a checkbox to power the machine after it's been restored. Next, we will talk about just security best practices. So Veeam now offers you a tool to uh, ensure that your backup server configuration follow security best practices. It includes 11 security checks and 19 product configuration checks. The 11 security checks are mostly services that Veeam will advise to disable in most cases to make your environment more secure. And the product configurations are checks that apply directly to where the backup is located at. If you have multi-factor authentication, if you have you know immutable backups, so those apply directly to the backup. So what I usually tell my customers is to um, go through the 11 security checks, try to change as much as possible, but for product configuration, try to have as much greens as possible. So this one you just go through, see what you can change, but product configuration you want to take a bit more seriously. So if you click on that security and compliance check button, yeah, this is what you will see. Again, those are the services that Veeam will advise, the 11 security checks that Veeam will advise that you disable for the most part, and this will, as you can see, sort of like try to see exactly where the backup file is located at, and a few more configuration focus checks to make sure that you're safe and you can restore from your backup. You will be able to apply multi-factor authentication for additional user verification. Um, you only can do them for individual users, so you won't be able to do it for groups. So you will have to essentially add individual users if at the time you've selected a group of admin to access the console and you want to enable MFA for them, you'll just have to add them individually and just check this box here. What's going to happen is Veeam is going to generate a QR code every time those users access the Veeam console, and they will have to leverage a third-party authenticator app such as Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticator, Duo, to scan this QR code and authenticate themselves before they can access the console. There is a four eyes authorization check as well, where you can require the approval of another Veeam administrator before certain operations are applied, such as deleting a backup, for example. You'll be able to see all of the events related to the four eyes authorization on the history view on the console. So this is what it looks like once you are trying to do a sensitive operation, and with four eyes authorization enabled, Veeam is gonna um, tell you that another backup admin needs to approve the operation, and the other admin will be able to come in here and approve it or reject. So as of the a few latest version of Veeam, we are pivoting, not pivoting, but adding more tools to the Veeam console that go beyond just creating your backups, um, making sure that the backup itself is protected, and we are adding more tools towards ransomware detection as well. Starting since version 12.1. So we can identify sleeping malware in production, scanning the backups that are already available before you restore them with ransomware uh, inside of them. So there's a few tools. One of them is Yara scans. Yara scans are, I mean, it's leveraging Yara rules, which is a type of pattern matching expression to uh, that can indicate the presence of malicious software by identifying patterns really um, that are known to be linked to malware or families of malware. When a rule find a pattern that indicate a piece of malware, then it can alert the appropriate person who can isolate or delete it. They can um, be used to detect malware base hash, specific strings, phrases, code snippets, registry keys that are linked to malware. Here you can select Veeam to find the latest clean restore points using the antivirus and the Yara scan. Um, find the latest clean restore point in range, or just scan all of them. Um, you can leverage this when you also are testing the backup. Veeam allows you to create an automated test of your backup called Sure Backup. The options to leverage Yara to scan your data can be done here, so you can enable this while you're doing your testing. You can also exclude link jobs to the scan, and this is where on the Sure Backup, the automated test tool, where you can enable it or run it. You can do additional things from Sure Backup, such as checking for corruption on the backup file, which is an option that can also be done at the backup level, but you can just know that you can also do this when you test your backup. So another tool that is used to uh, check for ransomware is the encryption and text analysis, or inline entropy analysis. This one focuses on scanning the data while the backup is being run, and it checks for things such as encrypted files, onion links, ransom notes, and alert you if there's anything, um, and flag the files are as suspicious. It leverages AI and ML to do the analysis. So you'll be able to see the infected or suspicious files, and you'll be able to choose what to do if you want to restore from a clean restore points or not. We also have the file system indexing that checks for known suspicious files and extensions, indicator of compromise, multiple deleted files, extension changes, and once it's identify one of those, then it also marks it as suspicious. Veeam Threat Hunter is uh, sort of a signature-based scan engine provided by Veeam that you can leverage with Tiara to scan for malwares. You can use it, or you can use your own antivirus, but typically Threat Hunter is faster. Now we will discuss tips and tricks to restore your backup data. If you need to create an incremental backup on demand without having to create a backup chain, you'll be able to leverage quick backups. It does require, however, a successful backup for the VM first. Same thing for a full backup. If you need to generate one on demand, you'll be able to just use Veeam Zip, and those will allow you to create these type of backup instantly on demand. You can create quick backups in Veeam Zip from the inventory tab. Once you open that and check the machine that you want to create them on, just do a right click and select which of the two you want to create. There is a plugin for Enterprise Manager and vCenter that allows you to check for Veeam operations such as backup, replication status. You can monitor jobs, outcome in view, and create Veeam Zip in Quick Backup. This is how the UI for the tool looks like. We have a copy and move functionality that allows you to move easily a backup from one location to another, or move backup to another job. You can migrate the backup file from REFS to XFS, to a hardened repository, from NTFS to REFS. You can rebalance scale-out backup repository, um, or evacuate scale-out backup repository as well. At least an extent of the scale-out backup repository. So This is what it looks like when you are trying to leverage copy and move backup. You first select the repository that you want to copy from, and the um, oh, sorry, you will be selecting the destination at this on this page after um, selecting the machine you want to copy from. We have an extract utility. Just know that if ever you are no longer with Veeam Backup Replication, if you're no longer paying for licenses, you will still have access to all of the backups you've done previously. You will be able to just download the community edition, which is the free um, version of Veeam Backup Replication, and restore anything. If that is not available to you, or for some reason um, you can't do that, then you'll be able to leverage the extract utility to restore your VM. We have a lot of labs available for you to test Veeam, different Veeam products and features. Really, it goes beyond Veeam Backup Application. You can request a lab for data clouds, data cloud products for Office 365, for Azure, for Kubernetes, casting for Kubernetes. You can test Veeam One, um, backup for MongoDB, and our disaster recovery orchestrator job, as well as the backup in Azure. I mean the Veeam for Azure product. We also have available training with an instructor or on demand to train you to become a Veeam certified engineer. We have a lot of theory and labs, and they're available in 100 countries. On top of that, please leverage things like the calculator tool to size your storage in your environment. The help center is where we have all of our documentation about anything Veeam related. Best practice is a website where we summarize the um, anything Veeam around best practice. So if you need, for example, to know how to properly set up a repository instead of looking at the broad help center documentation, you can just go here and it will tell you what's best practice when you set it up. We have a website for knowledge base articles, and the RID forums are very resourceful. Um, if you have a problem, you don't necessarily want to open a ticket. You just want to browse through what other customers have been um, going through or having were able to deal with the problems. You can just literally do a Google type forum at the end, and it will show you a bunch of article, a bunch of discussions around that specific problem. If you want to share your story with Veeam, with the opportunity to uh, speak at Veeam One, please let us know and send your email to this email address here. On that note, this is the end of this webinar. Please ask your question in the question under the question section. We'll make sure to answer them. Otherwise, you can always reach out to us, to your Veeam rep, and if there's something in particular that you want to know about, feel free to email us. We'll be happy to answer you. If you do not have any additional questions, we will resume this webinar. Thank you again for joining. This webinar will be is recorded and will be available to you very soon. We'll send you a link by email, and we have them very often. So be on the lookout for another one in the future. But thank you again for joining.